Why is there so much snow? I have no idea.
Just put it on tractor trailer, send it west. We can use it.
Oh, I would be more than glad. Somebody was mentioning, I'm not sure if it was Velda or Megan, that they have a flamethrower that you can use to clear your driveway, which to me
I saw that.
a good idea.
It seemed like the most natural thing to do. Is like, why wouldn't you do something like this?
Precisely.
Yeah.
You got to be a little bit careful when you're clearing it near the house.
We have like gas hot water heater and gas stove and stuff. They delivered gas, and my husband walked in and he said, "Were you here when they delivered gas?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, but I didn't pay attention." Evidently, it was not our gas company and it was not for us. Oops. And they filled up our tank. Like, what do you do? Yeah. I mean, it's like, you know, they can say, here's a bill, but we can say, hey, we didn't order this. Like, what do you do with that?
It's their fault. Yeah. They didn't verify the address. What about the poor person who didn't get their gas?
I know. That's what I was thinking. I was like, do you want to come over and take a shower? On the street. I got plenty of hot water. I've got a tankless hot water heater. Can you explain the mask in the background?
I have a 10-year-old daughter, and it's important to keep her on her toes. And her friends, at any moment, there just might be somebody walking around the house with that, and they just don't expect it.
Yes.
And we have friends that have little 5-year-olds. She's got this kind of very cute little lisp, and she's like, "Why do you have that? That's scary." I go, "That's exactly why I have it, because I want to keep you on your toes, because they'll overrun the kids will overrun the house if we don't instill a little bit of fear in them."
Hey, Doug, did you see our new coin design, our challenge coin?
I did. I've been seeing it all over the LinkedIn. My good friend Nadine just got hers, and I'm very excited to see that. That's awesome.
Yes. Shelby's got hers. You know what, Doug, we'll be sending one of these to you today, too. Simply because we really appreciate you, all of your help and your support for the community.
My pleasure.
And what you're doing. And people are asking me, how do you earn those coins? And that's really what it's all about is how are you supporting and helping our community? So
yeah, it's all about give to get in cyber. That's when I mentor people when they're starting out. They're like, well, how do I get started? I was like, find something to research on, blog about, just anything. It's unlimited amount of stuff to contribute. Find something to do, help somebody, and volunteer at conferences. You know, you got to give to get.
Right. And that's exactly how you go about earning these coins. So we're super excited. We're super excited to see people receive them and post about them and be excited about them. And I got to tell you, I just got my shelf full of coins here. I've been very fortunate. I think you guys can probably see it over the years throughout my works in this industry, to be given some of those coins as gifts, and so I wanted to be able to display them. And of course, in the center is the beautiful Wild West Hackin Fest.
Thanks everybody for joining. And
hey, Doug.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I think your camera had frozen and it keeps glitching on us. Do you want to just drop the camera during the presentation?
Yeah, want to do that.
Awesome.
So it's not as spazzy. I'm spazzy enough, so the camera doesn't help. But thanks everybody for kind of joining this. And the title of this one is "You Don't Have to Be Crazy to Work Here." Honest talk about a issue that I want to raise more attention about in cybersecurity. It's something that I don't think it's enough attention, and we need more attention. So mental health and self-care. So, cybersecurity professionals spend most of their day focused on the health and well-being of the environments in their care. However, the cost of reducing risk and keeping our network safe often comes at the price of our professionals' mental health. We've seen many InfoSec professionals burn out, suffer from anxiety and depression, and turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms, which of course further exacerbate some underlying psychological and sometimes physical health issues. So, really my goal with this talk, and I've been kind of putting this back out on the talk track more for this year, is to really alleviate some of the stigma around mental health and stress, the importance of an open and frank dialogue about this serious issue impacting our community. I'll share my journey. I'll kind of try to reverse engineer some of the stigma of mental health in the business that I've seen develop, and look at ways we can maybe hack mental health in productive and meaningful ways. So I have one ask as we do this. I know we're all busy and we have alerts everywhere. Just try to focus on the presentation and what I'm saying. Put down the phones, mute the alerts, and let's work on focusing on this together so we can solve these problems. First, there's a couple warnings I want to kind of get into, is that there might be some uncomfortable subjects that could be triggers. So triggers are those things that, to put it mildly, kind of haunt us. And when you're discussed, can make you feel like you're experiencing past trauma. And there's elements of PTSD in that. Sometimes you don't even know why it's happening. Recently, as I was putting together this presentation over the last couple months, I was listening to different things. And there was for example, like a Tim Ferriss podcast talking about his childhood trauma stories. And listening to that, I became upset and shaken. And to this day, I don't know why. And I've talked to therapists about it. And they said, there could be underlying trauma. You just don't know why. So these things can come out. So do not feel that you need to sit through this if you're starting to feel bad. Just turn it off, walk away, recenter, but please do not try to tough things out. There's no sense to put yourself through that trauma if you can kind of walk away from it. And another disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, nor do I play one on TV. So this presentation's information is not intended to imply or be substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So all the content, including text, graphics, images, and information, is for general information purposely. So myself, my employer, Wild West Hacking Fest, the Black Hills Information Security Team make no representation and assume no responsibility for the accuracy of this information contained or available through this presentation. So again, not medical advice. Please speak to your physician before embarking on any treatment plan. And whatever you do, do not disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking medical treatment because of something you heard or saw in this presentation. So that's that. Do you want to go over some definitions? There's some things that are kind of churning as we hear these different things when we talk about mental health, self-care, and neurodiversity. So from Health and Human Services, mental health is defined as something that includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, we feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. So many factors contribute to mental health problems, including biological factors such as genes or brain chemistry, life experiences such as past trauma or abuse, and or family history of mental health problems. For self-care, we like to talk about is any activity that we do deliberately, meaning it has intent, in order to take care of our mental, emotional, physical health. So these are not passive actions per se, but these are things we do with intent that are self-initiated and self-controlled. So neurodiversity has become kind of a new term, and I only heard about this within the last 12 months or so. And so as I kind of read around, there was a couple different sources. And the one that I found that really stuck to me from kind of a group source to definition is the idea that neurological differences like autism, ADHD, mood, and other functions historically been viewed with a very negative perception, but are the result of normal natural variation in the human genome and evolution. So as we approach this, we want to let this represent a new and fundamentally different way of looking at conditions that were traditionally pathologized in ways that were not universally accepted. So although it's increasingly supported by science, we want neurodiversity advocates to point out that neurodiverse people often have exceptional abilities alongside with what society has labeled as weaknesses. So it's, again, to build this acceptance and understanding of these conditions. But kind of due to the time, and not to completely fire hose you all, we really just want to focus on the mental health and self-care in this presentation. However, do some research on how to promote neurodiversity in the workplace, as all this really heavily overlaps. And I was just recently honored to be featured in my workplace, Splunk's neurodiverse video. They actually showed it last week to the entire staff, which I wasn't ready for, which made me a little anxious. But we are talking more about it as an organization. I encourage you to get your organization to speak more openly and frankly about it. So a little bit about me. I have about 26 plus years in IT cybersecurity, really heavily focused on incident response and kind of going in when the proverbial crap hits the fan, whether it be a litigation issue, compliance, government investigation, incident response, going in herding the cats. Graduated more to doing more CISO and leadership type work, incident response programs, SOC development, planning and program development, done tons of investigations into breaches, and some you've read about in the paper, some you haven't, most you haven't. Really kind of worked in some high profile, high stress environments. I have a podcast, Cybersecurity Interviews. You can see the mic flag on that. And right now I'm doing a 5-part series on that. And I really want to make sure that is again being promoted this year because I kind of have a platform. So my goals going forward, as I've been in this industry for a long time, is really to promote mental health awareness, become an advocate, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. They both kind of really work together. When we look at some of the staffing issues that we all know exist in the industry, I want to help remove the stigmas about different people and how they think, how they look, who they're married to. None of that matters to me. If you do good work, I want you on my team. And we're never going to be able to hire enough people until we get rid of some of these stigmas. So I really encourage everybody to embrace talks like these around mental health and diversity and inclusion. It's an important subject that we really need to focus on. As I mentioned, I've been doing some kind of incident response in my brain for a long time. And this was a plaque I got when I was only 9 years old. A friend of mine and I were skiing in New York, in upstate New York. Night skiing, we did it with the school every Friday night. He fell, was hurt, was crying. I immediately got him settled, went down, got ski patrol, brought them back, and I got this award for clear and quick, acute thinking in an emergency. So that, really kind of represents to me something that clicks on. And often ways I've described myself almost as the wolf, the character in Wolf of Pulp Fiction that comes in. You need to get rid of a dead body. You have 30 minutes before the wife gets home. I'm the person you call. I solve problems. And that's what I do. I go in, I talk fast, I act fast, but I get things done. And I can be very even-keeled when I can do that under high-pressure environments and situations with incredible amount of external pressure. However, under that is anxiety and other issues that have come out that don't necessarily always show themselves in these high-pressure environments. So I kind of like this meme because it's just people don't see the anxiety and they see this confidence and this ability, this cool character, but underneath it, at times, I'm really struggling. And there's times it becomes very hard to process that. And sometimes I can focus and fuse with that external stimulation, but in my brain underneath, there's things I'm thinking about like, oh my God, 5 years ago, I think I bumped somebody on the subway wrong. I wonder if they're still mad about that. I feel horrible. I mean, weird things that just obsess about and worry about that sometimes don't have any consequence to my life, but those are the things that make me anxious. So it's this weird yin and the yang of professionalism versus personalism. I don't feel alone in this. And the more people I talk to about this subject, I see that this is becoming an issue and we're not addressing it. Andrea Limbaga said in an interview a few years ago, when you're in cybersecurity, there's never downtime. It's nonstop and every day is a battle. It's added stress, again, in the workplace about doing that and having to absorb that, where you must be right seemingly all the time, and attackers only get to be right once or a few times, exploiting a series of vulnerabilities. So people in our industry now are experiencing depression, burnout, and even suicide are becoming more common among cybersecurity professionals. And according to the World Health Organization, depression is the leading cause of disability in the world, following heart disease. That should say something, that the mental health conditions are close second to physical ailments. And people with mental health conditions are the highest risk group for suicide in the world. There was a study a couple years ago that really kind of put some of this in light for professionals in our industry. And this is just for CISOs as an example. And really it's kind of been my focus area lately is on CISOs and executive leadership and trying to understand their mindset of what they're dealing with. So I found this study that Nominate did from 2019 particularly enlightening in a sense, or shed a light on things. So it was a global study of cybersecurity professionals. 91% of the CISOs surveyed said they had high levels of stress they were suffering, or that were moderate to high levels of stress they were suffering. 60% rarely disconnected from their work role. 88% worked more than 40 hours per week, with 27% that worked up to 60 hours a week. 89% of US-based CISOs have never had a 2-week break from their job. Most feel that their teams are underappreciated by senior leadership, and almost all feel that a breach was inevitable. However, their leadership, their CISOs, only felt that about 60% of the risk was there for a breach. But most of them still felt they would, a third of them felt they would lose their job or be written up if there was a breach. So there's no surprise there's a high turnover with CISOs, and most don't stay in their jobs for long. So let's think about that as we're building leadership and security programs, and we wonder, how are we going to win this war in cybersecurity? Is that if you have, a CISO come in, and from my experience, most take at least 18 months to really start affecting change, and ramp up time, getting their program setup, aligning with compliance and risk management, all that thing. So now you have this slow ramp up for over a year. Then what? Things get going well for a couple months, and then another CISO comes in with the same misalignment with leadership, then they leave again. It becomes this vicious cycle, and you can see why a top-down approach is needed in organizations to address this and other InfoSec problems. So mental health starts with leadership, and we really need to force organizations to adopt that mentality. And mental health conditions come in many forms. However, the stress either exacerbates these underlying conditions, and it can accelerate in onset and acuity. So if you have other, health issues, this type of stress is only going to make it work. So stress management is a huge root cause for episodic symptoms and these underlying diseases as they continue to rear their ugly heads. We haven't developed good coping mechanisms as an industry. Our go-to coping mechanisms, it's often alcohol, drugs. Oh, let's hit the strip club and do a party scene to go blow off steam. But that's not for everybody. Jamie Tomasello, speaking at Black Hat in 2018, talked about the stigma she faced being a recovering alcoholic in a culture that pushes us far too hard to blow off steam by partying. So as a community, we've done a piss poor job of helping each other here. And I'm not against going out for drinks, having a beer on tap at the office. Stuff I like to do. I have a bitters company for cocktail bitters, and I love that part of my life, but it should not be your only answer. And I've been bad with it at times too. So as much as I love it, it's affected me personally and probably staff and other clients. It's like saying, well, screw it. You know what? I'll just do that, like installing AV or something, and you're good to go. And so there's no one silver bullet to deal with our attackers or our health. We know that's not the truth in our computer networks. We seem to avoid a multifaceted layers approach in maintaining the health of our neural network. So just like we have layered security, we need kind of layered mental health coping mechanisms. So we need to change this like yesterday, because as we all know, the past year has been nuts. We've had a pandemic that's affected everybody. We came off a very toxic political season. So the external stresses have been really bad. It's been a hard year for everybody. We've disrupted our work schedules, our school schedules, our routines are off. For me, this is the longest I've not traveled in my professional career. I miss seeing my friends all over the world. I miss being on stage, doing the Doug show in front of clients and customers. I'm completely off my game, not doing this presentation with you people in person. And I'm not looking for pity, but to say you're not alone if you're feeling that your life has been upended. Multiple times today, I'm talking to friends and family that are starting to struggle, and coworkers. Everybody's getting cagey. And I would do anything for those that I work with, that I feel close to, but I have to admit, it makes me feel powerless right now. I can't just sweep in like the wolf character and fix things. We have to kind of ride this one out. And as you can see from this article, just for me locally, it's really stressing people within my community and my state. And it's alarming to me. And there was one sentence that came out of this, that was this one article that I'm referencing in particular on the slide, said it's the unrelenting horizonless of the COVID world, like it's never going to end. Again, just another added stress on our daily lives as cybersecurity professionals. And the long tail effects of this could be devastating. Suicide rates are on the rise. Even in my home state of Colorado, it's grim. Again, people are feeling helpless. But there's a song, and if you tell by my blue mohawk, I like punk and hardcore music. I'm a New York hardcore kid. But as the band H2O said, helpless, not hopeless. You got to keep that PMA. And it's tough. Because if you don't try to frame things properly, we don't try to address things, it's going to get worse. And so we have to talk about this. Mental health cannot be avoided as a topic in cybersecurity any longer. And it's my pledge to the community to raise awareness and remove the stigma. And I do not have all the answers, and I won't pretend to, but I won't be shy to talk about it. We are hackers. We can figure this out. We'll find a better path forward together. So Corona aside, which is obviously the elephant in the room, which is only exacerbating underlying issues, we really do need to step back and do some root cause analysis on the profession itself. How did we get here? Information security as an industry is still relatively new. It's a bit of a Frankenstein monster that was brought to life by IT, consulting, operations, legal, compliance, privacy. We have a bit of an identity crisis as we enter our teenage years. And with that, I feel like we've adopted a lot of good business practices, but also a lot of negative. There's so much pressure to work harder, work longer, tough it out, be aggressive. I do well in it. Like I said, I'm a type A, and we'll talk about it. It comes at a cost. But this type of mental construct doesn't work for everybody. The staff I've hired in the past 5 years have wanted a work-life balance. Money, titles, glory are less and less important to people. So as an industry, I feel we do not have a good answer to these needs of how to address this. I have some ideas and I can show what works financially, but they have to be adopted, tested, and peer-reviewed of what's going to work. Also, another factor before I touch on my journey, lives can be on the line with cyber if you're in certain industries. Think of healthcare and everything that's going on right now. When I was in pure IT, I can always blame a bad patch for a down server. It would suck, you get yelled at, and maybe you roll back something. A breach, it's not a technical problem. That means a human did something that allowed a breach to happen. That's heavy shit that no one prepares us for. Again, we have to be right all the time or else. And that's not fair, healthy, or scalable. So we got to start changing that. So I do want to talk about my journey. I was born in New York City in the 1976, which I still have to do the math to figure out is actually 45 years ago in a couple months, which is scary. And I grew up being, relatively in a safe and good environment. I had amazing role models with my parents, loving and caring environment. But at times I always felt like an outcast. I looked at the world differently. I thought, what I realize now is that almost hacker mentality now of skepticism and questioning things. And sometimes that created some conflict with people. They didn't understand, why do you look at things differently? And why do you like what you like music-wise? Whether, even, getting into technology and computers as a teenager. Now it's, we're pushing people to do these types of things. But if you were a skater listening to punk music, working with technology and reading comic books, that sounds sexy and cool now because Disney Plus promotes it, but it sucked for me horribly in the 80s and 90s. I got my ass kicked a lot by the jocks, by other people. I was an outcast. So going through my teenage years sucked. And I didn't know how to cope with that because by all, measurable outcomes, I was doing okay in school. My family life was good, but I didn't feel at place. And I didn't know how to process that. I didn't even know who to talk to about that. So incidentally, I turned to other coping mechanisms. My friends found marijuana and they said, oh, try this, and start self-medicating. And only in my second experience with that did it tick off a horrible anxiety and panic attack that lasted for weeks. And it really was through my sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system out of balance. So your sympathetic nervous system is kind of what prepares your body for the fight or fight response during potential danger. On the other hand, your parasympathetic nervous system inhibits the body from overworking and restoring that body calm and composed state. I was in fight or flight constantly. I couldn't sleep, massive panic attacks. I went to the doctor multiple times and they're like, there's nothing wrong with you. And my parents were frustrated. I was frustrated. And it didn't take till probably about, I'm not joking, like 2 weeks of going back and forth to the doctors. We're like, do you know what a panic attack is? I'm like, no, that's what you're having. Go talk to the psychologist downstairs. And I did. And I got treatment for that and some medication. And it changed my life. But I didn't know that there could be these triggers and these things. And, just not dealing with things, particularly as a teenager, it was tough. And got some help out of that and got myself back on my feet. And everything seemed to be going fine. And that was really my first bout with anxiety, dealing with that. Coming out of high school, there was no path for me in technology and cyber. It was still a relatively new industry in the early 90s. So I'd started my own business doing, what we would call like kind of PC help desk type stuff now for small, medium-sized businesses, go in, set up their networks. So I spent lots of times in sealing, pulling coax and terminating that. You kids today don't know how lucky you have not to have to do that and have wireless. God bless you. But, that was my business and it was doing really well. And so now here I am, a young entrepreneur. I don't know how to balance my life and my work life. Most of my friends have gone off to college. So I didn't really have a good peer support network around me. I had some friends, people that did go to trade schools or other things, and maybe they focus on different things, but I didn't have other young entrepreneurs to kind of commiserate with. So I just buried myself in work. And eventually within about 6 years, I started burning out. I put too much on my plate. I was traveling all over the place. I was doing things. I started bringing on large enterprise Fortune 500 customers, and I was doing it all myself and subcontracting and running a business. I wasn't really prepared for it. So I started burning out. And after like the third or fourth burnout, again, I sought help again. That kind of helped level me a little bit. Things went fine for several years. And it really wasn't until, I would say the past 10 years when things started kind of coming back again. Met my wife, who I love to death, in 2006. 2008, we were married. 2010, we had a kid. And I had to start slowly pulling myself out of being an entrepreneur and going and bringing my computer forensic and security practice into another company, because things like healthcare and just the stability of that, of not trying to run a business while you have a young family in New York City, was more of a stable thing. But I started having more of an identity crisis. Now I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm now working for the man. And in my mind, I was really struggling with trying to put myself on where I was in a career path and a life path. Because again, I kind of came out of a do-it-yourself kind of mentality, and I didn't have a lot of peers or other people to share my journey with or bounce the ideas off with. So it was really stressful. And my wife had started her business at the time, which was weird for me, because I was looking at her, I was like, I spent all this time getting out of running a self-business. Now you're doing one and you're dedicated, and I'm spending more time at home with the kid. And again, just not talking about it and dealing with it, and this identity of who I am as a professional, a father, it was really difficult. I struggled with it, to be frank, and finally kind of figured some of it out and continued to build myself professionally. 2016, things were going not great. At the time, I was helping run a security practice in New York City, and my mentor and the person I started the practice with was kind of unceremoniously executed professionally in front of me. He was fired for no other reason than cost cutting, and the entire practice was landed in my lap. And I was unprepared for that. But I kind of fought. I got myself together. I pulled whatever books and resources I could to figure out more about leadership and team building, and really kind of started on this journey of really putting together a solid team and feeling good. And things went really well for the end of 2016 to early 2017, when we decided, my family and I, to move out to Boulder, Colorado. Moved out here, brought the practice out here. About 2 weeks before we had the actual move, we were in a very severe car accident. Somebody was texting on our phone, ran a red light, hit my side, spun us around 3 times. Luckily, it hit just before the passenger door and on the fender, but spun me around with enough force that I got out. We were like shaking, daughters in the back crying. It was a traumatic event, and without a doubt. I mean, it was scary as all hell, but I didn't feel anything. Just everything was on fire emotionally and just going. Took about a day before I started feeling the back, and then I couldn't move. And my entire right side of my body was in excruciating pain. I couldn't move my foot. Went to the doctor, got an MRI. They're like, "Yeah, you blew out a disc. You have a severe herniated disc. We don't know if you're a candidate for surgery. Recommend some PT." I'm like, "I'm moving in 2 weeks." They're like, "Well, don't touch any boxes. Get on a plane and go." And it was an awful situation to sit there and not be able to help my family move across country and be severely injured. But kind of got through. We get out here, start getting settled, and things are going okay. I probably didn't express to my job enough of what was going on with me personally. And they decided, by some austerity measures, looking at the Q1 results, they wanted to cut out the security practice, particularly with me out there, and they cut us off completely. So they fired me, all my staff, everybody. They shut down the entire division like that, with no benefits, no warning, nothing, no severance. So now I'm in a new area, spent all my savings moving out here. I'm injured, and I've lost a job. But I'm like, you know what? I'm a fighter. I'm going to do it. So I start trying to get ready. I'm like, I'm going to volunteer for Denver B-Sides. I'm starting to focus in on that. Starting to get stuff ready for that. And I'm moving boxes, which I shouldn't have been doing. Boom, really re-injured my back now. I had to cancel my volunteer work with Denver B-Sides, which was awful, because I felt like, geez, I've let these people down. I'm in excruciating pain. Doctors are like, yeah, you just really flared this up. And so now I'm in a new town, have no friends. I'm just in excruciating pain, lose my job, lose my livelihood. I didn't know what to do. Things started getting dark. And so if you look at what's the Holmes Rain stress inventory, it's like where you kind of rate life changes. This has been used to kind of measure where people are in life with stress. As you can see, 150 to 300 points is a 50% chance of a health breakdown next 2 years. You get up like 300 points or more, 80% chance of health breakdown. When I did this score, 400, over 400. It was unbelievable where my mind was. Like I can't even describe what it was like. Because if you really look at the pain scale of how this all adds in, of both the mental and physical pain and the trauma of everything, I was probably at an 8 to a 10 on any given day at any given moment. I couldn't sleep, massively depressed, massive anxiety bouts, and I sunk into a pretty deep hole. I mean, things were dark to the point where I thought about suicide, where I thought that there was no way the pain would ever end. And it was a tough time. And what it does to your family, to have a young daughter who's trying to get adjusted and having to be tough for her. It was harder than I can ever imagine or care to, probably can't even remember at this time. For those who've been in that kind of pit of despair, you can't put words to it. But there's a passage from William Styron in his 1990 memoir of depression called "Darkness is Visible." I'll read this quote, and rarely do I read from slides, but it's important to read it and hear it because it kind of does some justice, but it's still, unless you've been there, you have no idea. The gray drizzle of horror induced by depression takes on the quality of physical pain, but it is not an immediate identifiable pain, like that of a broken limb. It might be more accurate to say that despair, owing to some evil trick played upon by the sick brain, by the inhibiting psyche, comes to resemble the diabolical discomfort of being imprisoned in a fiercely overheated room. Because no breeze stirs this cauldron, because there's no escape from this smothering confinement, it is entirely natural that the victim begins to think ceaselessly of oblivion. Yeah, so it was a tough couple months. There's no doubt about it. But I was lucky enough to have a family that was there and be in a system where I was able to reach out and get some care. Luckily enough, because of the auto accident, we were getting insurance money from that to cover medical care, and I was able to get mental health care, which, as we all know in our country, is extremely hard to get at times through insurance and other means. But luckily, they agreed to pay for it because they knew it was all part of it. So I was able to kind of recover, get back on my feet. Within 3 months, I had been able to get stable again, get my health back in order physically, mentally, just build out routines. Found a great therapist here that was aligned with me and my needs, and then get the PT I needed for my back, and things started getting better. And there was light at the end of the tunnel finally, when I didn't think there was going to be. I was able to then, reach out to my support network of people, say, hey, look, I'm back out here in Denver. I need to establish myself again. Obviously, I'm passionate about things. And a buddy of mine said, hey, look, we're looking to grow our West Coast presence for our practice, for our incident response team. Would you open up the Denver office? And I did. And I went full bore into that. And by the end of the year, I had 6 employees and I was back on my feet again. But I'll tell you, man, that time from March until September, those 6 months felt like 60 years. I can't explain how long that times went. I'll kind of cover someone I did to get out of it, but it was a battle. And it was sometimes 2 steps forwards, 1 step back. It was never easy, but it was worth it for my family. And most importantly for me, I decided I deserved it. And I needed to understand that. And that was a tough lesson of that, is I deserve to get better and give some self-care to that. So things have not been perfect from then, but for the most part, they've been great. I'm very fortunate now to be in a job I absolutely love. Things are better with my family. Sometimes I'm not going to say it's perfect. It's been up and down. The last year has been a struggle, but you learn from these lessons. You learn to be in the moment. You learn to accept it, and things get better. So kind of where do we want to go from here, as an industry? We got to remove the stigma that health is health, whether it's mental or physical. So mental illness is an illness. Got to move past the stigma and shame that people feel about their illness and differences, because this forces people to self-medicate and not seek professional treatment. Delaying treatment just makes things worse. So we wouldn't tell somebody who's diabetic to suck it up and just smile like we would with people with depression. We wouldn't call them, like we call people crazy and all these other kind of terminology, which, is part of our lexicon and it happens. But you wouldn't call somebody who has diabetes like, hey, insulin baby. We don't make fun of physical ailments the same way we make fun of mental ailments. So we need to stop treating each other that way. And I bet many people who are on this call have had experiences where they just didn't feel mentally right that day, mentally healthy to go to work. And instead of saying, hey, I just need a day to get centered, I have something going on in my life, they've used a physical ailment as an excuse to take a sick day. And we need to grow past this. And so again, I talked about like building teams. And why? This is just me being altruistic? Well, I started looking at the numbers of how I started building teams and building a safer place for people to feel better about themselves. So yes, I'm a capitalist at heart. I love that competition, making money and building a business. But what if I told you I've consistently looked out for the mental well-being of my staff, particularly in incident response, and it resulted in people that were happier and therefore better at their jobs? Really it should be a no-brainer that when you have higher employee satisfaction, you have happier customers as well. And that results in more top-line revenues and greater profit margins because you're doing things right the first time and not having to rewrite it. We've all rewritten those, either pen testing reports, security assessment, incident response reports that somebody is burnt out on, and you're like, fuck, I got to rewrite this whole thing. How is that helpful for us? If we just told that person, hey, take the night off, reset, come back to this fresh in the morning, we wouldn't have to redo so much work. But we constantly do this in our industry. So when people feel their best, they perform at their best. Full stop. Mental health versus business is not a zero-sum game. Everyone can and should win with it. So there are some steps that you can take, and what I encourage you to do. And first is talk openly about mental health. I mean, if I can do it, you can do it. Educate yourself and others. You know, there's tons of resources out there, but look at your employee resource groups. Find out if there's a neurodiverse group and you can get help and other types of things. Particularly now with COVID, hopefully that removes some of the stigma. And do be conscious of your language. You know, when we do say disparaging things about mental health, it does make it harder for people to get treatment, and really kind of encourage that equality between physical and mental illness so they're looked at the same. Show compassion for those with mental illness, because you might be in that side one day too. Choose empowerment over shame, particularly for yourself. You know, feel that you can do that and don't feel bad about it, and get away from people that make you feel bad about it, because you have to be honest about treatment. And getting it is there for you, just like you would with if you had a physical element and get help. Why not do it with mental? It's got to get past that stigma and call people out that are being stigmatizing, right? You know, I know we're kind of in this culture now where everybody's saying on two sides of, you know, where we're being overly empathetic or being sort of, I don't believe that shit, right? And when to the guy that says everyone is so sensitive these days, you know, to them I say, no, people have always been aware of what an asshole you're being. We're just telling you now. And that's where we have to be. Just don't be shy and calling people out if they're using words that do hurt other people. And it's not being overly sensitive. It's just we're in a culture now where we do need to treat people better. That's it. So don't harbor the self-stigma, because it's okay not to feel okay. And just accept that on certain days. Because look, things are not going to be perfect all the time. One thing that was given to me by my therapist, and I'll kind of cover some of the things that I've done, and your models may vary, is, you know, pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. And it is kind of a, you know, flippant platitude, but it should help as a framing mechanism that you're going to suffer. I mean, or have pain. But whether you decide to lean into that and suffer, you can make that optional by seeking treatment and getting help. And so some of the things that I've done, and I'm not, you know, worried to say, is I've had different types of medication. They've been extremely helpful in balancing things out. I've used acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. So it's an action-oriented approach to psychotherapy that stems from traditional cognitive behavior therapy. And it's a kind of really build this acceptance that, you know, for lack of a better word, shit happens. You know, things happen. So stop avoiding and denying it and struggling with the inner emotions of why, and instead accept that these are deeper feelings and you're going to have appropriate responses, but just don't, what they call fusing in the therapy. Like, don't attach yourself to these feelings. Feel them, accept them, but figure out ways to move past them through different types of therapy. One thing that I found has been extremely helpful, like I said in the beginning of this, is like turn off all your devices. I do that all day now. You know, reduce the alert fatigue. I've been an inbox zero fan for years. I've even had people say, well, what do you mean you don't check your email that much and you only do it in a batch? What if I'm trying to get a hold of you? And I had one of my IT guys say a couple years ago, well, what do you mean you don't have your email on your phone for work anymore? I was like, no. He's like, well, what if I need to get a hold of you? He's like, you don't know how to get a hold of me on my phone? And he's like, oh yeah, I guess so. Set different SLAs. Like if somebody emails me, they should know that I'm not going to reply within a couple hours. They need to get a hold of me, pick up the phone and call me, text me. Most people are in Slack now. There's other different ways to get a hold of people, but don't be so married to your technology that the expectations that you're always available for people. You know, that comes in setting some good boundaries for yourself. And so set some schedules around that. There's no such thing as multitasking. Set time for deep work. Do things at different cadences that allow you to be best at the times that you need to be best. And when you're tired at the end of the day, that's the time to not do deep work where you're writing out a 5-page blog, but maybe you're just answering emails because you're more burnt out then, and the emails don't need that much focus. So just find different routines that work for you. And your overall routines, like find a good morning routine. You know, before I wake up, before I touch tech in the morning, I do meditation. I use the Headspace app. I journal. You know, I don't touch technology for some time in the morning because it just starts that awful dopamine response of getting into things. And so I really try to make sure that I get through a good morning routine that's followed with, you know, a good diet and hydration and sleeping and exercise. And just doing it on a cadence that works for me. You don't have to be perfect all the time, but at least enough that I know most of the time I'm adhering to that. And we talked earlier about alcohol and stuff. I encourage people to take drinking breaks. People do dry months. Hell, it is for 4 or 5 days. Just take little breaks, allow yourself to kind of reset, and it's good. It's just healthy. Abstinence and whether it be occasionally or forever should be something that you look at. And overall, I can't focus enough to be more accepting of who I am. And I encourage you to do that too. My therapist said, you don't have to fix everything, Doug. And I know that's how you operate, and that's why people bring you in. They don't call me when there's not a problem. They call me to fix problems, but that doesn't have to be me all the time. I'm unfixable, and I just have to accept that. I'm flawed, and that's fine. I just have to accept that and live around those flaws and celebrate what's great. Do want to talk briefly as we wrap this up a little bit about self-care. And self-care is something, again, what you deliberately do to establish and maintain your health. And these can be habits and routines. And it's really nice little intervention things you can do on a daily basis to help prevent some of the long-term illness. So think of it as like proactive and preventative steps you take at work. It's like doing vulnerability research, threat hunting, patching firewalls. It's those little things that can kind of help get you right, so to speak. It helps your body also regulate serotonin and dopamine, which are the two popular neurotransmitters in your body. It helps regulate mood and well-being. So dopamine being the feel-good neurotransmitter. Serotonin does a ton of different things in your body, but it helps regulate anxiety, happiness, and mood. So helping these things keep in balance through some of these techniques are good. It's things you can do with low cost. So the one thing that I really, it almost seems goofy to say, but, celebrate the small wins. But do that. If you had a good day, if you did something good, you write a good report, a customer receives it well, celebrate that. You do good work. You need to celebrate those small wins and enjoy them. Other things to do is like calling a friend, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Just having a shoulder to cry on and having that within your network of people to talk to. Just say, yeah, today I don't feel right. Just having that ability to reach out to people. Again, we talked about technology, and stop the doom scrolling to the extent that you can't get off of social media. If you've seen movies like The Social Dilemma, that stuff is wired to make the negative aspects of your brain fire. Get away from that as much as you can. And it's hard. I use it for branding and promotion of myself, but I have to stay away from some of those dark holes where you get into, because it's just toxic. Things like the news, and the news, like the news cycle last year sucks. Take breaks from it. Don't read the news obsessively. There's things you can control and things you can't. Most of the things in the news you can't control, and it's only going to make you feel worse. So get away from that. Get outside, do exercise, set those routines to meditate and exercise, put away the tech for a little while. And again, done is better than perfect, because you need to take those breaks and just manage your time better when it comes to a lot of this. So you set those boundaries so you yourself are not overextending yourself and not letting other things kind of influence your life as well. But there are negative aspects to self-care too. Touch on briefly is, there's kind of fake self-care, and I've fallen into this trap myself. And I've done most of these antics on the list of, dieting, drinking, talking crap to myself, rushing out because, I just got to get away from things. I'm going to FOMO of missing out. I got to go out tonight instead of just staying home with the family. It's very easy to fool yourself and do unhealthy things in the name of health. Most of these fake self-care tactics make you feel good in the short term, but it is fleeting and it's not impactful in the long term. So really focus on the things that work. And again, yes, you can. There are myths that self-care is being selfish. It's not. It's your life. Take care of yourself. You deserve it. When you feel better, you treat others better. Try to set something up for your self-care where you're doing it for 21 days. Get into a good habit. 21 days is this kind of idea that you do something for 21 days, whether it's not drinking, exercising, whatever it is, sleeping right, you tend to form better habits. Maybe some pseudoscience behind it, but I've tried it and I found it works for me. Your mileage may vary, but doing some things for a couple of weeks will help get you into a better habit, and you're less likely to kind of fall back into bad habits. And so just find those little spots throughout the day where, it doesn't have to be an all-day thing. Maybe it's 5-10 minutes here, a few small spots throughout the day, but it needs to be part of an ongoing practice. When you are at work, you can bring some of these things into yourself too. Set yourself up with a workspace that feels comfortable. Your workspace versus your living space. And a lot of us are kind of merging into this each other now, but make your workspace good. Get rid of the clutter, making sure your ergonomics is good. Have the right lighting, plants, essential oils, whatever it is that kind of sets your mood right, and encourage those healthier activities with your coworkers. Go do stuff together, go take walks together, just do stuff together and set a more comfortable environment in that sense. And I really encourage people to take your PTO. And a lot of us in security, like I said, let's look at the CISOs, man. Most do not take their 2 weeks. Take yours or more. Do you have unlimited PTO? Use it. It's okay. You have diminishing returns. Humans are not meant to work 40 hours a week. Like you're productive probably 30 to 35. After that, there's enough science that says there's diminishing returns. So really kind of set your boundaries on that so you don't overwork. When you get away from work, stay off of work. Take that time off. And you don't always have to do, again, things with clients that are going out to drinks. One of the things we started doing talking to customers is, hey, let's, I live in Boulder, so I'm obviously very lucky, but to do things outside. It could be a hike. It could be I started a ski and snowboard networking group up at the local mountain where every Friday last year and the years before, started with 3 of us, we got to 40 people. We would meet and do work on the lodge. The mountain gave us an entire lodge, dedicated Wi-Fi. They did not like me criticizing their Wi-Fi infrastructure, so they finally fixed it. But they got it set up where we can have a working space, and that worked well for them. Then they branded it as a marketing thing, and I would have friends call me and say, is this your working group that I'm seeing on their webpage, their social media feeds, and on TV? I was like, yeah. But there's healthy things you can do that can be part of a working environment too, that doesn't just involve excessive eating and drinking. Finally, do not just give this lip service. Change happens with intent. It won't happen on its own. You really have to go out there and almost, force it, make it happen. Be the change that you want to see. So there's some parting thoughts on this, and I definitely want to leave some time in case anybody has questions. But I'm going to two things I really kind of want to give you to think about as you go through the rest of your day. And this is something from Robin Williams, who I think we all know now had committed suicide, struggled with mental health, was pretty open about it. But one of the quotes that he said that's been quoted that I try to remind myself every day as I go through my day and dealing with other people. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind always. I mean, what's the worst? There's no reason to fire off that email flaming somebody. Just put it down. Like, you don't have to go off onto somebody right then, and just give everybody a little bit more breathing room. So the best piece of advice Warren Buffett had ever gotten was by this guy, Thomas Murphy. And he said, Warren, you can always tell someone to go to hell tomorrow. It was such an easy way of putting it. You haven't missed this opportunity. Just forget about it for a day. If you feel the same way tomorrow, tell them, but don't spout it out in a moment of anger. So just like we said, we do incident response, not incident reaction. Slow your roll. Just be vulnerable. Let other people be vulnerable. It's okay. Nothing's perfect. So just as we don't have perfect networks and impervious infrastructures that are going to be, they're not going to be hacked, like, treat the same way as yourself, give yourself a little bit of wiggle room in others. This is one of my heroes said from the movie Roadhouse, which obviously is one of the best movies ever made. Like Dalton said, just be nice. It goes a long way. So I beg you guys, be nice to yourself, be nice to others. Because if you don't choose to make time for your wellness, you will be forced to make time for your illness. It's going to fester, and it's going to build over time. So before I end, I have a request for all you is, when you go to bed tonight, take an actual pad and paper, put it down next to your bed, put the phone away somewhere else when you wake up in the morning. And when you wake up, maybe pick up that pad and paper, get your coffee, sit down, don't touch your phone, don't turn on the news, don't turn on your laptop. Sit there for a minute, kind of collect yourself, and write 5 good things about yourself on that piece of paper. You're all saying, Doug, that seems silly. I can do that right now. Do it in the morning after you reset, before you start your day. Write down 5 good things about yourself. I bet it's going to be a lot harder than you think it is, but it's a good framing tool to help you orient yourself about yourself and how you're going to start your day. Because it's very easy to get pulled into all the other crap, but remember about yourself and what you can do. When you take care of yourself, you're going to take care of others. So please, again, go forth, conquer, but be nice when you do it. Thank you.
You know what? This has been such a great talk, and I've been watching the chatter here in Discord, and a lot of people are so in agreement with what you said on this. And I think it's so important. At the beginning of COVID, I bought and sold a house. So I spent the first 6 months of COVID, I was working, but then afterwards I had a house to put together, right? I had boxes to unpack. I had that kind of stuff. And now I'm everything is done, and now we're into winter and the holidays are over, and it's like, oh, now I understand what everybody else was feeling during the times when I was busy, right? And I think what you said is so important, taking care of ourselves, taking care of our mental health. Just absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
So great talk today. Great talk.
It does look like there's some questions. I don't know if Shelby was going to kind of go through in GoToWebinar. One person said, can you talk about the 8-hour workday? If you're getting a work-life balance, should we expect to work 8 hours?
My preference in the way I've run teams is solution-oriented time management, meaning that every week, a lot of us have to do, it's not always a consistent 40 hours worth of work. It's probably like an average that's pulled out over 52 weeks. There's some weeks where I've had to work 60, 70 hours a week, but there's a lot of weeks where I didn't. And so I take that time, and I've encouraged my staff to, I was like, look, if we've hit our goals and we don't have anything else to do and we've really busted ass for 2 weeks, let's take some time off, go home. Like, it's still, you've put in the time, and I really try to encourage organizations to look at it that way. And, there's ways to structure that. So for one way that I really did it from the business side of it is with my pen testing engagements, I encourage folks to do fixed fee pen testing engagements that held their time, that they had a certain allotted amount of time to do it. And it became kind of a race for the senior and junior pen tester to get as much time, get it done in as quicker amount of time for kind of doing hacker simulation type attacks. And they would. And then they were like, cool, we got the report done where everything's done early. What do we do now? I was like, take time off. Like, you did it. Like, you earned that time by being more efficient. So the more efficient you get, I'm not going to sit there and drain the swamp on that one. It's like, you earned it. And, we would find ways to financially reward them and give them time off. And there's lots of ways to do that in business. And that's just one example of just giving people that incentive and motivation to hit their goals, both financially and whatever needs to get done on an outcome base, and then still give them the time to manage themselves. We're adults. I'm people's boss, not their babysitter.
There's a couple more questions. Just to let people know, this will be available on our YouTube channel in a couple of weeks, most likely. Generally, if you subscribe, you'll get the notifications when it's live. But another person asked, when your company's HR is hesitant or resistant to support a push for mental health discussions, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, and it's tough. And I've been in organizations where it was, particularly I would say in technology, where it's like it's there's kind of a friction, so to speak, with it because I may not get it. The way I found to deal with that is really finding peer groups within the organization that are maybe informal. Outside the organization, there's groups now where people can talk and find mentorship. And that's sometimes what you have to do is just get outside of that workplace, but maybe encourage other people. And certainly, it's a fine line to walk to get other people involved with this, but maybe finding if you can get kind of at least a cohort of people to talk about it in your organization, it might encourage that organization to do so. And look, and if you're having any trouble, I've tons of stuff on this of how to business justify this, because that's the way also my brain works is I still think that happier employers are more profitable employees. And so I think there's a striking balance there, and there's some ways to frame that to the business, say, hey, this is a worthwhile cause.
I just wanted to mention this comment. I thought it was really good. Doug, I know that you mentioned doing 5 good things about yourself. Somebody, Leon O, mentioned, how about we do a gratitude journal? What are you thankful for? I think that's a good suggestion.
I try to do that every day, especially like post-trauma of things. It's like, the perspective of things. And look, this last year has been tough for a lot of people. And knowing the stuff that I've been through that I just talked about, to be in such stable area now, it's been a blessing in disguise in a certain way. I probably wouldn't be as grateful this last year, and probably would have not gotten into an organization that accepts me for who I am had I not been through those trials. It helped frame things and put things in perspective that I probably would have continued a lot of bad cycles of my professional and personal life had I not just had that kind of a level of intervention.
And that's really interesting because Megan and I worked for a company, and we talked a lot about the fact that we didn't have great experiences there, but the bottom line is it was a great education, right? It gave us knowledge, but it also told us what we didn't want to do. So I think that's awesome. I mean, I think that how you look at everything determines a lot too, right? I mean, if you look at it with eyes and say, it was so rotten, it was so terrible, but you try to turn it around and say, what positive come out of this, right? Yeah. What are the positive? What are the upsides of it? I think it's all depends on how you look at things.
This is actually my signed copy from Ryan Holiday of The Obstacle is the Way. It's a short read. Let me see how many pages this is. Yeah, it's less than 200 pages. But yeah, this is my signed copy from Ryan. Tim Ferriss sent it, which was pretty cool. But it's The Obstacle is the Way, and it's the art of timeless turning trials into triumph. And this idea is that he covers a lot of stories about, in kind of using stoicism and that stoic mindset of, it is framing. It's all perspective at times.
Right.
The story was, Amelia Earhart was not the first choice to be a woman pilot in some of these early test pilots issues of all this. So she kind of took the jumper seat, and people would say, but she could have walked away and said, screw them. Like, they'd treat me, do you know who I am? And she's like, no, you know what? Took it with grace, learned from it, and took everything as a learning opportunity to grow. And that's all you can really do. I mean, you're just not going to have perfection in your life, and you just have to look at it from the perspective of how am I growing from this? How am I going to contribute more to my family and to my community today and then tomorrow? And it's just slow incremental gains. And not every day is going to be perfect. And give yourself a ton of breathing room on those days where you don't, nail the targets.
Yeah, and having a wide set of goals instead of a very narrow goal, then, you can celebrate, like you said, the little victories. If you're exercising and trying to lose weight, it's not necessarily the scale that's gonna be the deciding factor of whether you're being successful or not. Do you feel better? Are your clothes fitting differently? Are you sleeping better? So there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of go about celebrating things that are happening. It's not an all or nothing kind of mentality that I think a lot of us do to ourselves.
Oh yeah, I'm about as guilty as anybody's going to be on that. If it's not perfect, everything's just it's a disaster.
It's ruined. Forget it.
This has been great, Doug. Thanks again so much for being with us, for agreeing to speak. I know we're welcoming you back to Wild West Hackin Fest, and we're looking forward to another presentation. I think we're putting another one on the schedule between now and those events for you, and you're welcome to speak with us anytime you want. We definitely love hosting you, and I just feel so blessed to have gotten to be friends with you over the years. This has been such a great positive experience. So thank you for everything. Thanks for all you do for us and for the community.
I'm only standing on the shoulders of giants. Again, can't thank John Strand and you guys enough for what you guys do. And I love that we get to wake up every day and do something we love with people we love. It's what better life is this?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Amen to that.
Amen.
Well, yeah, we're at the 2:00. So unless there's any final words from Doug or the deputy.
Doug?
Well, I just thank you all. And like I said, challenges tomorrow. Write down those 5 good things about yourself.